Hi, Drum.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Awesome.
Todo bien.
Todo bien. For those of you listening in, todo bien means all good. It's been a little phrase, I would say, that was definitely
One that
stuck
Sure.
and caught on, that's for sure. We hope that you are todo bien.
Yep.
And excited to have you back for week 8 here, episode 8 on our little Poco a Poco journey.
Yep.
Today was the day that we had got the advent calendars out for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
We've decided we're going to do a countdown to the day we leave going home instead of a countdown to Christmas. So
That's right.
we started our advent calendars this morning. So 24 days.
And then we
get to go home for the holidays.
Very cool. So what are we talking about today?
Well, I want to talk about football.
Okay.
Because I think that's been a huge, huge part of our journey here.
Yep.
More than I expected, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember talking to the kids before we came here and asking them to choose like academics or football as a primary focus.
Yeah. What do you want the point of gravity of your experience to be built around?
Yeah, we had some school choices, one of them extremely academic. We had some football options, some of them really intense. We're like, we don't want to put you in an environment where you have to do both of these things at a really intense level.
Right.
So kids chose academics.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly after arriving here, we connected with a coach, I guess.
Yeah. Coach / agent / manager, somebody whose job was to work with a lot of international families who are coming into Spain to help them figure out the best position in place to put their kids in to continue to develop them. And for some families, that means they have the eye on a prize like La Liga, and they really want to position their kids well for going to play professional sports. And for most kids, including ours, I would say, it's just trying to figure out this whole landscape here in Spain, find a good place to play football, and put ourselves in a spot where instead of trying to figure it out over many years,
Yes.
get right into it, find the right level, and just be on with it, right? And
Yeah.
for Quinn in particular, our eldest, with university and college being a year and a half now around the corner, starting to ready herself for playing sports
At that level.
At that level, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we knew that football was going to be an important part of the kids' lives, even if it wasn't their primary focus.
right.
Without that, and I don't think we would have been able to navigate the system
No.
of finding them teams and places to play without,
This help.
without this help.
Yeah. And so this gentleman that we've been working with, we had met him at the end of August when we had arrived. It
Yeah.
was an introduction that we had through some family friends. And our whole goal was for the first month, we're just going to get to know him. He's going to get to know us. And before making a commitment for the whole year, let's just see where the kids land. And after that, we found some teams. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And we were at a bit of a decision point to say, do we want to continue to go beyond just playing 2 or 3 times a week at a club level and to work really in a focused way with him and some additional coaches to focus on some specific player development and skill development for the kids. So we made the choice to do that with Quinn because of how proximate she is to going to university, going to college, right?
Yeah, and this particular manager
Yep.
feels, and so do some of the other coaches from the La Liga level,
Yep.
feel she has a lot of potential right now to really
Absolutely.
do something great with football. So suddenly we have 2 primary focuses again, but I digress
We
on
digress,
that.
that's
But why are we talking about this today, Dave?
Well, we're talking about this because we had agreed to kick off this training at the beginning of November. You think back a couple episodes here, and November was when that big Dana storm had came through the Valencia region. And so everything here, whether it was school, soccer, sport, everything was shut down,
Yeah.
including his training. And
Right.
so it was nice because 2 weeks ago, everything was back on.
Yeah.
We had reached
We
out.
thought
hey,
we were life back to normal.
we're ready to go here. Yep, perfect. We had one practice with this group, and the coaches were late. No problem. It was pretty messy. It took us even a lot longer to go and actually get to the field.
Yeah.
But then the next day, radio silence. The
In fact, we
manager-
went to practice, Quinn and
That's
I.
right. On the Saturday.
On the
You showed up
Saturday.
and nobody was there.
No coaches
Calling,
arrived, no
reaching out.
manager.
We're thinking that we have gotten the wrong time. And we quickly realized that this manager that we're working with has gone AWOL, MIA, not returning any text
Not a
messages.
single person had heard from him.
Nobody. All the other families had no idea where he went. His family wasn't reachable, and none of the coaches knew where he was. Like, he just vanished and like almost like vaporized out of thin air, it felt like.
Yeah.
So it left us scratching the head because we're like, what the fuck? What do we do? And we're just at the doorstep of already being delayed a few weeks because of the storm, and Quinn's
Yeah.
getting excited and a bit anxious around that. And all of a sudden it's like, where the hell did this guy go?
So odd. Really odd.
So in the absence of knowing the story, naturally you start to make up your own of what maybe is going on. And then it was just yesterday or
10 days probably after
10 days
the...
passed, yeah, but 2 days ago from today,
Yeah.
all of a sudden on WhatsApp, ding, 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 hey there, sorry, was having some personal and professional challenges. Practice starts up again on Wednesday, see you this week. And I'm sitting here just being like, huh? Like, what do you mean, bro? It's just firing back up on all cylinders. What happened? Where did you go?
Yes.
Right? So this has led us to really just hitting pause a bit and going back to, I think, the fundamentals of why we were getting into this, what some of our expectations were. All along the way, we were having some challenges with him that just felt a little bit off, right? What were those that kind of stood out for you?
We are in Spain, and
Yep.
I mean, there's a clear...
Different way of doing things.
Yes, there is. And things aren't quite as on paper, signed, sealed, and delivered. There's a lot of conversation. This is how it's going to be. So I would say with this person in particular, communication has always been a challenge. This is the most extreme version of the challenges of communication with him.
Yep.
However, I remember when you drove to a game an hour away with Quinn, and lo and behold, the game had been canceled for rain. But at this time, he was our only connection to this team that Quinn was playing with.
Right.
And just didn't tell us until, I think he sent a message at noon. Oh, game's canceled, but the game was at 9 a.m. Yeah,
exactly.
So that's an example of some poor communication.
Another one that comes to mind is around our first invoice payment with him.
Yes.
Where I remember that we had just kind of started into there. He had loosely said, yeah, this is how much it's going to be for the month. There was no invoice. There was no due date, anything like that. And 24 hours before our weekend practice, he just messages us. Actually, I think it was less than that. And he's just like, hey, sorry, practice is not able to run today because you guys haven't paid yet. And it's just like, sorry, we never knew that we had a due date or that we had to pay by X moment in time, or if there was an issue, my goodness.
Communicate with us a couple days before, because we're
Exactly.
making international transfers at this point. We can't get you the money in 2 hours.
Pronto,
It takes
like a
couple
little
days.
communication. And all of a sudden, it's not so much us being frustrated. It's like, gosh, the kids are really excited to go to practice. And all of a sudden, we're just
We can't
like,
practice
can't
because
go
we
as a
can't
result of
get
this.
you money in time that we didn't know was so urgently.
The core piece, though,
Needed.
as we were saying, is communication.
Yes.
Like it just felt a little bit off as we continued to look at that. And then when we met with him, there was a big kind of promise around going to games, watching the kids, talking to them one-on-one around their development, where they're at. And there
As you would expect from that level of coaching, right?
sure.
Like a bit more hands-on, not just show up at practice, leave, but actually helping the player develop into the best version of themselves without us having to be the people providing that constant counsel.
Exactly. And so suffice it being said, whether it was communication or following through on the expectations, we have felt a little bit let down in this space. At first, we thought it was just kind of figuring things out. But this like MIA for 10 days, no communication, was just one of those moments where it's like, hey, hold on here. And as we spoke about it over the last few days now, it would just remind us of how important clearings are in some really key relationships in our life. And clearings are something that we've done a lot of in our partnership. We've done a lot of with people around us in our life. And I think it's been really impactful, especially in those really important key relationships. And we want to talk about that today, because in these types of moments, there's kind of two pathways. One is either you suppress all your frustration, everything that's pissing you off and annoying you. And for most people, that means that inevitably they just blow up and have an expression of that frustration, or just say, I'm out of here, I'm done, we're no longer working with you.
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? That version reminds me of when you have a gas leak in a space and you don't know you have that leak, but there's a spark and it's like, boom, this thing explodes. And everyone's like, what? How did that happen? Right? That's what it reminds me of when you just keep everything in. It's like you're keeping everything in the space. You're like putting gas into the space and you can't really see that it's there. but it's prime for like one little spark to just boom.
Yeah, it's like a powder keg of gas starting to grow. And as
Yeah,
soon
yeah.
as there's a little bit of a spark,
Exactly.
kaboom.
Yeah, exactly. That's that method for me is that.
That's actually reminded me of a time that I burnt the hair right off my hands lighting a barbecue, but I digress.
Yes.
And so for us, we've been on the receiving end of that. I think a lot of people have been
Yeah.
in those matchstick moments, right?
That's how I know I need a clearing with you. When you blow up over something little, that at those moments, I'm like, oh, what does Dave need to clear?
Where's the
With
gas?
me.
Where's the gas? from?
He's leaking in our relationships.
Totally. And I think what we now see as an opportunity in this moment for us is instead of letting the gas leak,
Yeah.
and there being one more thing, which will probably happen, is this is a great opportunity for a clearing. And so we want to talk about how do we do clearings.
Yeah.
I think this will be a helpful conversation even for us to share in front of some of the people that we love around how we're preparing for this one, with the hope that we can inspire you to avoid these gas leaks in your relationships and really use clearings as an important part of the way that you're building relationships to reset them and put them back on track.
Yeah.
So where do you want to go next?
Well, why don't we talk about how we prepare to have clearings with people? Because I think that's been really helpful for me. I struggle to start clearings, so I've always found it really helpful. You're a very process-oriented guy. I'm a very spontaneous kind of girl. And so I like talking through how we think about this. So why don't we talk about the things we've talked about, what we want to...
Yeah, and how we've got there.
Yeah.
I think one of the things when we start preparing for these conversations is reminding ourselves that this is a choice point that we're creating in this relationship.
Yeah.
It's a moment and a point where we're giving this manager a choice to be able to reset with us and to be able to begin again. And it's also a choice point for us that we are standing up for and advocating for some values or some key principles that are really important and inherent to who we are.
Yeah.
It's about standing up for something that we really believe in and the standards that we have in the way that we want to build relationships with, and going about that in a way where, like any good clearing, you have the conversation being okay with any outcome.
Right.
Which means that this might lead to us no longer working with this manager, and that's okay. What's really important is that we are speaking truthfully about what's really on our hearts, because if we don't, the gas just still continues to leak.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think when I think about that, I really care about fairness. Fairness is a really important concept to me in my life, for however that's developed. And I always thought it was very unfair when you don't have these conversations, even if I'm not very good at them. It reminds me of so many friends that I've seen go through these awful breakups, for example, in their lives, where they're just blindsided by somebody who doesn't want to be with them anymore, and they didn't even really know there was a problem in the relationship. And I think the idea of not having this conversation is that it's like unfair to the person that you're working with not to tell them, hey, here's something that's not working for me. Here's a chance for you to respond and do something maybe differently, or be aware of how I'm feeling in this dynamic, so that you have a chance to decide for yourself if you want to do something. Because when you leave it too long, of course, there's like so much resentment, or in a relationship, it's like by that time, that person just doesn't want to be with you anymore. They've built up enough evidence that you're not the right person for them. They just end it, right?
Right. Even
As
if they
opposed
do
to...
eventually figure out that something's bothering you, you've already made up your mind
Exactly.
that you're done with it.
Yeah, exactly. So then it's hard to respond or have a healthy resolution in that.
Yeah, it's such a good point you bring up around fairness. And as you share that, it's reminding me of all the different places that we've had these conversations to be fair to people, to each other, with each of our kids during points of development in their life. We've had this with almost all of our au pairs at some point in time when they've come to live with us, and we've been figuring out how to best partner together and work together so that they have a great experience and we do as well, right? I think this conversation or clearing to get back to the essence of a fair relationship that's working well for everybody Happens in so many different places.
Yeah.
So I think the most important place is to use pain as a tool.
Right.
And like you said, you know that when I'm a little bit sparky and there's some of that friction that starts to exist,
Yeah.
that pain is usually a good indicator to say, hey, there's a bit of a gas leak here, maybe. What's going on?
Yeah.
So in this case, what was the real pain for you with this conversation we're about to have, where you were like, something's got to give here? Like, what's the kind of the moment for you in this experience that we have saying there's a clearing on the horizon?
I think for me, it's watching the disappointment in Quinn when things are all over the place, and then having to try to come up with something to counsel her to keep working towards her goals when I'm not really the person with the expertise. I don't know Spanish soccer system. It feels like I have an expert that isn't providing the expertise. So I'm having to do another layer of support that it's not really my job. So I think the pain point for me is having to wear a hat that I was kind of hoping to take off.
Right.
I have a lot of hats on. If you could see the number of hats, it would be a lot. Like Dr. Zeus style. So I'm just kind of hoping to, get rid of one.
Yeah.
What about you? What was your pain point?
Seeing you go through that. Because the consequence of that in our relationship is that now that starts to sabotage some of your best time and energy, and it's palpable in the dynamic where we're starting to partner together. So I've learned now to be able to look beyond my own acute frustrations with you or the way that we work together to say, what could be going on that are creating the conditions where this could be taking place?
Right.
It's really helped me better understand that it's maybe not you trying to do it or me maybe doing anything that's creating to that. Maybe it could be possible there's something else on the go. And I would say the impact that it's had on you, putting on more hats, is an example of a pain that has been a bit of a trigger, if you will, or something to say, hey, there's a clearing here. I would say another one is when he came back online and he texted me and said, hey, we're good to go. There was a feeling of anger that came through me where I was just like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Fuck you. You don't walk away on my kids like that for a week and a half with no communication and then come back just saying, see you Wednesday. Not a fucking chance.
See you next Tuesday, as your mom would say.
Oh my gosh. If you know what that means. So I think those are really good places to start. But when it comes to a clearing, starting to use pain as a tool.
Yeah. And I think that's always how our conversations start. The first thing we ever talk through is like, what's not working?
Right.
Why are we upset?
Right.
And then what?
Well, sometimes these conversations aren't even worth having.
Right.
Sometimes you have experiences with people and you're like, you know what? I just know we spoke about S versus Esta. I've now learned these experiences that this is just who you are. This is your character. And so I think that next step is really starting to look at the situation through this lens of character versus behavior.
Right.
What's really going on here? Is this the character of the individual? Because I don't want to change people. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
I'm interested in curating great people and allowing them to be who they are.
Yeah.
Right? And so if it's a character issue, I think it's a very different conversation, maybe one that we can have another time on the podcast. But separating out character versus behavior to be able to say, hey, we believe this gentleman is helping our family is a great guy. Like at the core of it, we've seen him go through a few trials and tribulations. We feel like he's got lots going on in his life. And it makes a little bit of sense to us that there are some challenges that might create some of these dynamics that he's going through that we don't fully understand. We don't really believe it's like the essence of him. We could understand the environment that might be creating some of these behaviors.
Yeah.
And separating.
And he's good at what he does.
He's so good.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He's
very
very,
talented.
very, very good. But there are some specific behaviors
Yes.
that we are finding difficult to work with and that are getting in the way of us having a really lovely working relationship together. And behaviors that for us to fully engage without having gas in the room still, if we're going to begin again here now that things are back on, that we want to clear and we want to talk about openly to be able to create that opportunity and give him a fair shot.
Totally. And truly, if you want to make progress in something, If it's constantly being started and stopped and started and stopped, it's like we can't accomplish or help Quinn accomplish her goals
No.
if it's like this. So his behavior is disruptive to the goal
Yeah,
we're trying to accomplish.
absolutely. His behavior is,
Yeah.
not him as a person. So I think that's a good next step, is just to really delineate the difference between those two and just asking ourselves, as we have, to say, is this a conversation in a person that actually deserves a clearing,
Yeah.
right? Or should we just move on?
Right.
And we've decided that this is an individual who deserves a fair shot at that.
Yeah.
And that we do believe in the character of the individual, right?
Yeah.
Then from there, I think that's where we started to naturally shift towards, okay, we've talked about the pain. We've made a decision if this is actually a conversation worth having.
Yeah.
What do we actually need now? Like, if we're going to talk about things being off, instead of going back in time, what we really want to do is talk in the future to say, here's what we need a little
Yeah.
bit more of. So in this case, when you think about having this conversation with him, what is it that you need more of or less of to feel like we're back on track?
Yeah. This part of the conversation is something you've really taught me over the years. You're very good at this part where you don't just come with a problem like, hey, I don't like it that you're not communicating and you said you were going to do this and you're not doing it. You always are very thoughtful at bringing this next piece of the conversation, which is like, this is what better would look like to me. This is what I want. So for me, like the bigger picture of what I want, I just want to take that hat off. You know? And so when I think about what that means, I want him to communicate more with Quinn. I want Quinn to understand in small steps how she's making progress. I want him to do the things that he said he was going to do. So I want him to come and watch her at practice and say, here's on games, and this is what you need to do next, right? And here's where you're succeeding. Kind of like that. If you want somebody to be intrinsically motivated, they have to feel competent. So you have to make the steps small enough that they can make them. And then you have to be watching and telling them, you made that step. Good job. That's what, to me, a good role for that manager is and what I'm trying to do. But I don't know the space well enough to do it in a believable way for the kids because I don't really know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So that's for me what I would like more of is just that vision of taking that hat off and giving it to him. He can wear one of the hats and to help her in her journey. That seems like what his role is.
Yeah, I love that. And as you share this idea of taking off that hat, it reminds me of a heuristic or a way of thinking that I often bring to these moments, you know, because a part of it is there's some facts, like there's some things that you really want him to do. I want you to come to the games.
Right.
I want you to be meeting with Quinn individually. Like those are things that we need, right? And that's like the matter of fact. We should be able to watch that happen.
Right.
But in addition to that, there's also a feeling. So as far as what we need, there's a feeling that we need more of in that, which is we're feeling that Quinn is supported and being guided to see the progress that she is making. That's not something we can see objectively. I mean, if he shows up at the games and he's meeting with her one-on-one, sure, that might be an indicator that we're moving in that direction. But the feeling that we need is that she's being supported, that she feels that she's building progress and knows that she's doing the right things.
Yes.
Another feeling is I don't want to feel like I'm having to coach her. I want to feel like I can be her cheerleader and somebody who is celebrating her and a participant in it.
Exactly.
And then the other piece is the future. So if we're on track here, what should we be able to go in the future that we aren't able to do right now? And like you said, take off the fucking hat. Like I just want to be able to not think about this every single week.
Yeah.
As a result, I want to have more capacity based on the contribution that you're bringing in. So I think when we think about what we need, that's a helpful lens to think about the facts, the things we actually need to do, the feelings that we want to be able to experience, and then the things we want to be able to go and do in the future. Facts, feelings, future.
And I think that makes the conversation even easier. Instead of saying, this is what you're doing wrong, is you're saying, like, this is what I need. This is how I want to feel in this dynamic. Can you do that? Can you provide that? Is that, or is there a different way I should be looking at this?
Yeah, I think that's what I've also learned, why it's really important to have those conversations, is because a lot of the times it's easy to go back into even like a scope of work and say, well, you said you were going to go to all the practices and you weren't there.
Right.
And you can talk about that as much as you want, But if you're not clear on the feeling you want that to create, I've
Right.
seen a lot of situations where people have these clearings. All of a sudden, I'm showing up to all the games,
But still the problem is,
but the problem is still there,
yeah.
right? So I think it's a really important piece to think through is that feeling component in particular.
Yeah. Wise. And then let's talk about the worst part of this conversation for me. There's this one part of this conversation that I have the worst time with, and it is how to start. Like, I dread the feeling of saying, I need to talk to you. Because I think I've been on the receiving end of that, and that like feeling where your heart just falls into your stomach and you're like, oh God, there's something really serious, something I did wrong, like instantly puts you on a defensive. Like, I used to almost get like shaky. If somebody said like, I need to talk to you about something, I would have this massive adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
Or I'd be like, oh no,
Yeah.
it can't be something good. It's something bad. So let's talk about that. How do you start these conversations?
Yeah. To your point of you really struggling with this part of it,
Mm-hmm.
this is something I feel like I'm really good at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that I often struggle with
Yep.
is I let the room fill with a little bit too much gas for too long.
Yeah.
That's my thing for sure, especially when it comes to between you and I and the
Yeah.
kids at times. Partly, I think that's because you have more exposure to people. People like this, Marinder, you see them once or twice a week.
Right.
Bit of gas come in the room, but when you live with people, you're all sharing the same room, right?
Yes, for sure.
Metaphorically speaking, at least.
But yeah, I need some support on
Okay.
this starting point.
So let me coach you through this if I can.
Yeah, okay.
So if you were
Even with the kids, I'll be like, I know I have to talk to one of them about something, and I'm just like, I can't even start. I could sit for 30 minutes in silence in the car thinking about, I don't want to start this conversation. I don't even want to open my mouth and say, hey, Quinn, because it's going to be like, you know exactly what's coming. So anyway.
it's a good reminder that past hurt informs future fear.
Yes, right? Wow, okay. So tell me.
So in this case, you've come to know this fella, well, pretty good over the last 8 weeks or so.
Yeah.
What would you say are a few things that he really values?
I think he really values his own knowledge in the soccer space, in the football space, and his wisdom. And it is quite palpably good. He's very astute in his observations. And I think he really values that.
Okay. What
and
else?
I think he takes a lot of pride in watching young athletes develop and being part of their journey. So that's kind of those things.
And when
about him.
he works with the kids, so the time that we have seen him, what are the ways that he works that you notice that he really values? Like things like giving really honest feedback to the kids?
Yes. Yeah, he is. I've never seen him gloss over anything. Even if it comes to losing a sale with us or anything, like there's nothing glossy about how he delivers information. It's very honest.
No rose-colored glasses with him, right?
No, none.
I've noticed this with the kids. He is very direct. He's very honest.
Yep.
And he's doing it with the intention to say, I want you to know this so that way you can get better.
Right. Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, very much so.
So the way that I always think about starting these types of conversations where you don't push somebody into a corner and you get their back up
Yeah.
is by actually starting by identifying something that they really value and setting the tone right out of the gates that this conversation you want to have is because they value that so much.
Right. Okay.
So in this particular example, what it might sound like is, hey, I'm so glad that we're able to start practice again here. I'd love to jump on the phone and have a quick conversation. And when you jump on the phone with him, you can say, I know you value, and I've seen this with you with the kids, I know how much you value giving honest and transparent feedback to help make us or other people are successful. And so I want to be able to have a quick conversation with you about some of our experiences to make sure that we're moving forward together in a really deep and connected way.
Okay.
So what are you noticing in the difference there?
I mean, I think when you can establish some kind of shared value and sense of pride in something, when that thing really does matter to the person, they can make the conversation about that thing that matters to them instead of something they've done wrong or immediately about their person. It can be more about a higher value that is shared or that they have.
Yeah, and that's
It's
really
hard to argue against that
well, exactly.
when
And
it's true.
and that's the key thing. It has to be true. That's why I
Yeah.
said, like, what are the things you've actually observed there?
Mm.
What we wouldn't say is, hey, I know you really appreciate being really organized all the time and communicating really well. So I wanted to
Right.
have a conversation with you and be really communicative around this.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say to you, like, I know you really value me being available to me at all moments of the day, no matter what I'm thinking.
Just sure. But the point is when you reaffirm to somebody
Mhm.
the level of integrity you see in them
Yeah.
around a particular value like that, you're presenting this conversation as another opportunity for them to see themselves living into something that's important
Mm-hmm.
instead of getting on the defense. Now, having this conversation and having this clearing is actually an activity that this person can get engaged into that is helping them actually see themselves positively.
Right. You know, you're just so much better at it than me.
Maybe I'll have this conversation this week.
You really have a way to like frame it that feels so comfortable. I don't know how many times I'll have to do this terrible 10 before I flow like that, you know?
What I'm observing is you know what to go and do. You're a very smart person.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to ask you, hey, can you write this down for me? Like, what do you think Danny's values are? Case in point, you already know, you already listed them out really clearly. Okay, perfect. Let's role play and kind of go through this. Yeah, you know exactly what to say and you'd be all ready to go. There's still this hesitation I see in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good indicator that it's not knowing what to do. It's overcoming your anxiety management system.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, if you were to think about having this conversation with him,
Mm-hmm.
what are you worried might happen?
I think what I'm worried about is that it wouldn't go well or that I would put him on the defense or make him feel badly and he would respond poorly to that. I'm more worried about him not being happy
Okay.
with the conversation than I am about me. But I think what I need, if I think about, I think maybe you gave me this advice a long time ago, like when you do public speaking or you speak in front of a group, instead of thinking about, will they like me? Is it going to be good? Think about what you're bringing to them and the people that you're speaking to. Really make it about them and not about you. It's easy to, like, is this conversation about you or is it about me? So I think holding that value, truly, I want you to be the best version of you. And I'm part of your dynamic, but it's bigger than that. I'm telling you this because I want you to be the best version of you while you're working with all these different kids. So this is what I need, but I'm also, it's for you. It's not, it's for me and for you.
Yeah. And in my experience, I think that's totally true. And that's something that can pull you forward and something that will still keep you in the car for a long time, but not actually having the conversation is going to be the worry that if you have it, it's not going to make him happy. It's
Right.
going to make him upset.
Yeah.
And fundamentally what that means is that you have a hidden commitment of being somebody who makes other people happy. Or put differently, you have a hidden commitment that operates inside of you of being somebody who doesn't piss people off.
Yes, I do have that. It's not that hidden either.
Sure. But my point is, when it comes to your anxiety management system, that's actually what's getting in the way here, is that you're afraid that by having this conversation, you're going to go against a commitment that you have as an individual,
Right.
right? And so there's this assumption that if you give him direct, clear, honest feedback, that it's going to make him upset and angry and frustrated at you, right? And to
Yeah.
your point, if you think about this bigger ambition, and this is why I go back to the values, you know he's actually somebody who values direct and honest feedback.
Right.
So if you didn't give this to him, it would likely be something that would actually make him off and frustrated with you at because you didn't bring it up,
Right.
right? So what I think is important here is if you look at that, the way to be able to move faster into some of these conversations is starting to realize that, hey, I have this worry that I'm not going to live up to this commitment that I have of being somebody that makes other people happy. And the assumption here is that if I have this conversation, I'm going to make them unhappy. Is that true? And that's where over time, what can happen is if you're just mindful of that dynamic, once you start to have these conversations, I've no doubt, I bet you this one's going to go really well, is my hope. You start to slowly build some evidence that starts to actually help you realize that having these types of conversations, when done with respect, when done thoughtfully, when thought through, can actually be the very thing that increases how much people respect you, how much people feel like you actually contribute to a sense of well-being and happiness in your relationship and the harmony that you have. Does that make sense?
It does. Can I add another question or even a clearing with you?
Sure.
Okay. So I think another thing, in addition to that feeling that we just talked about, that I have is the fear that if I don't start the conversation right, I'm not going to be able to get to the goal for either of us. Because in our dynamic, I find often I'll start the conversation wrong at the wrong time in the wrong way. And that's a conversation ender often for us. You don't, after that, you're just like, I can't believe you would start that conversation like that. It becomes about that. And same with teenage kids are similar. Like if you don't open, right, they're just like, shut that conversation down. So I think I also fear the start because I'm afraid it's going to end the conversation before we can get to the point of the conversation. You know, like if I don't open right. So do you have any advice for that?
Well, I think
I mean, you would have advice because it happens with us a lot, right?
for sure. And I think the best way to actually address that, you've heard me say this before, work on the plumbing when it's not raining.
Right.
Bringing that up when there's already fumes in the room and there's tension here.
Yeah.
This is a great example of, and I like how you're using this as an opportunity to have your own clearing with me. This is hilarious. But this is a great way of like being able to have clearings, or when you're able to have good conversations to say, hey, by the way, one more thing. When we have these types of conversations, one of the things I really liked about today is that even when I didn't start it correctly, you still kind of kept with me. And I've noticed that's hard for me sometimes in the past. It makes me not want to come to you with important conversations. So I think even just you being able to point that out
Right.
as something that you need more of, just like this,
Yeah.
right? If you think back to this, there's the pain. Okay, well, look at the pain that you have of wanting to bring things up and then just marinating it on your own, right? Or when you do bring it up and it not going well, there's the pain.
Right.
Character versus behavior. It's clear that you think I have great character, right? So you know this is definitely a behavior thing. And then being able to start to articulate, like, here's what I need a little bit more, right? I mean, it's foolish to think this is always going to go perfect. It's a dance. But I think going back to some of these fundamentals absolutely increases the probability of these clearings going well. And the most important thing I believe is that conflict, these types of clearings, are the only way of building really badass, awesome relationships together.
It's true.
So it's worth doing.
Yep.
Thank you for bringing that up. I will be very mindful of that now going forward.
Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. So,
Well,
how do you want to wrap?
Well, I mean, I'm excited to have this conversation now. I kind of feel like I should be the one to have it.
Ooh.
I'm scared.
I'll be in the background. Go, Jet, go.
My little earpiece.
Oh, no, don't say that. Too fucking late. Too fucking late. Too fun.
But I'd love to hear what conversations other people are having, and love to hear from everybody listening. Are you good at these conversations? Do they go well? Have you learned not to have them? Or what's one that you need to have that you haven't been? I don't know. What about you? Anything else you want to?
I think that's great. I mean, the thing that I think we're enjoying most in this process is just continuing to hear from folks about the things that are resonating, the things that you want to hear us sharing openly and talking about more of. This is just a great place where we're just trying to continue to share what's working well for our family, what's not, what we're still learning in the process. And we just love continuing to hear from you. So yeah, like you said, share what part of this process is stickiest for you. It's clear that we have a couple on our end. And I think knowing how important these types of conversations are and how much a lot of us avoid them, it's probably not so much if you struggle with these conversations, it's more where within the conversation do you struggle. So we'd love to hear from you.
Update to come next week on how the conversation went.
Awesome. Look forward to it. Okay, bye for now.
Bye.